combining all the topics of movies and television and video games is a franchise that indeed spans them all.
Hmm.
And we thank everyone for joining us on this momentous occasion because today, the very day we record this, is Star Trek Day, is the 55th anniversary of Star Trek. And they did a poor job promoting this, but there's been today on YouTube, on Paramount Plus's YouTube page, and on StarTrek.com/day, some like live musical events and some panels and some stuff like that.
Hmm.
So after the show or whatever, tomorrow, if you're interested in that kind of thing, you can check out Paramount Plus's YouTube page and watch all that fun stuff and continue the Star Trek celebration. So, I am wearing a Star Trek shirt. I actually got this Star Trek shirt from cereal boxes. I believe
Love
this
it.
is when I believe this is when the reboots reboots, I guess in air quotes, whatever, were
The
coming out.
films,
Wow.
Yes.
J.J. Abrams films.
And mhm.
You
So
just
I
send
don't know how
in the
when that
cereal
was.
boxes? Like,
Yeah.
you actually
Mhm.
cut them out of the cereal boxes?
I
Yep.
love it.
Gosh.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It still fits. It's proof I didn't like balloon in the last however many I don't know how many years it's been now. It doesn't seem like a long time, but it
I think
probably has
it's like
been a while.
12 years. 2009 was the first reboot movie.
Okay. That
Yeah.
sounds right. Yeah.
Ooh, that is a while ago.
Um
Mhm.
yeah. So I've got that going for me anyways. I'm not sure where to start exactly, but I think might as well go around and just get a little bit of a breakdown, like what Star Trek means to each of us. What was your first Star Trek? Should for sure get that in. Like, what was your
Mhm.
first exposure to Star Trek? Maybe what is the let's start there. What was your
First
first exposure
exposure.
to Star Trek, and what was that like for you and everything? Emily, kick us off.
Hmm.
First contact.
My first contact. So I think it was when would this have been? Mid-90s. And TNG was
Hmm.
actually, I learned in researching this, it was always syndicated. That was actually how they went directly to the air, was in being directly syndicated, which was unique for the time. But it used to be on at like 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock on weekdays.
Hmm.
And so I would get home from the bus and like rush in to be able to like turn it on and start the episode as it was. So it must have been like the 4 o'clock getting home from school. And so that was my first experience, was watching those for a little bit every day as a kiddo.
Nice.
Mhm.
I had a very, very similar experience. I don't believe that I was lucky enough to start at like the first episode of TNG. I'm sure that I like kind of found myself, in the middle of some season and then, kind of went back. Um, but uh so TNG had late night runs
Hmm.
that I stayed up watching with my dad. So my dad and I were like champions of like late night sneak it in television when my mom was asleep and didn't know. We watched Star Trek, we watched Xena, Hercules,
Nice.
so some other like
Nice.
excellent classics for sure.
Mhm.
I think sometimes they were on like UPN, sometimes they were on like other like rando channels that don't even exist anymore. Um, but yeah, whatever they were on, that's what me and my dad were watching late at night, and that was my first introduction into Star Trek as well was TNG.
Nice.
John, any introduction to TV, or was it the cereal boxes that and the movies that got you in?
It's one of those things that I definitely had exposure to it as a kid, but it was so limited that n- like it left no impression.
Mm,
I know that I saw some of the original series um very young. but I couldn't remember basically anything from that. And then Next Generation, I only remember it like as it would like come on, and then it seemed dull and it would be changed. The channel would be changed. So like I just it never made any sort of connection with me. I think that my passion ended up, getting like I was sucked up in Star Wars, as a child. So it didn't leave room for Star Trek. And I know other people that got into it because their parents watched it and they watched it along with them, and my parents weren't interested in it either.
Sure.
So I didn't have that connection. And all my friends, when I was younger, almost none of them were into like quote unquote nerdy things. Like it just, I don't know. It's like the school and the low population I had or whatever was just like, I mean, I was a huge Star Wars fan, and no one else in my school apparently liked Star Wars, basically. At least no one in my grade or anyone I knew. And until like a friend moved in, a new friend from out of state, it was, oh, hey, a real person that likes Star Wars. Okay. But so, anyways, Star Trek wasn't involved there.
Sure.
And so I didn't get interested in it more until the rebooted movie. Oh, I did see actually a movie in the theaters. I saw before the redos. I saw
Don't say
Nemesis, I
Nemesis.
believe.
Oh, he said
Yeah.
Nemesis. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. I don't know why. I probably because it reminded me of Star Wars or something from the previews or whatever,
Sure.
somehow. And so I do remember seeing that, and again, that not leaving a big impression on me. But yeah. So I'm sorry to everyone out there. I'm sorry.
Apologies to all the Trekkies.
Mhm.
Yep. Trek. Okay. Do you guys prefer Trekkies or Trekkers?
Ease.
Ease, yeah.
Mhm.
Trekkies.
Okay. Okay.
I don't know
Trekkies.
anyone who says Trekkers. It's supposedly this big controversial thing, but
I've never met anyone
met
either.
a Trekker.
I agree. Yep. Totally. Right.
But yeah, you got to bring it up. I mean, it's a thing.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yep.
I've never heard that or heard anyone like use it. I mean,
Yeah. Yep.
Mhm.
So since I've gained much more admiration for the series, for the franchise, though my catalog is still pretty narrow. But why don't we go through then? Like, so we've seen how you've been introduced, but like now, what made the biggest impact on you? What's your favorite part of the Star Trek universe? What series or movie or book? What's like the Star Trek thing to you? What's like, Star Wars, it's Empire Strikes Back. So it's like a go-to, of course. That's the best. How about for Star Trek for you guys?
Mm. Well, I'll let
Either
you
of you,
answer that
whatever you
first,
get.
Andrea.
Okay.
I
All
mean,
right.
I was just gonna say, like, I can't get away from Next Gen. Like that was my introduction. Like that's Picard is my captain. Like
Mhm.
that's where the love started, and that's probably the thing that resonates deepest with me is that series. I mean, I'm not gonna say everything about that series is perfect because it's 7 seasons long. It's bound to have some slip ups, but I mean, it was such it's in a way it reminds me of the reboot of Doctor Who. It sort of like restarted and kicked off the love of Star Trek, and it had like spin-offs that it spawned, like quite a few, as I'd forgotten some of them, but I was like re-looking everything up for this episode. When you think about like Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, like there was so much that it really kicked off and just became this like phenomena. And yeah, I think you know any any Trekkie will have a special place in their heart for Next Gen because that's what it did and it made it so huge. And without it, you wouldn't have had this like massive influx of media around Star Trek.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I feel like TNG is probably where where my mind goes when I think about Star Trek. I didn't
Mhm.
like I went back later and watched the original
Right.
series. Um and yeah, like TNG is just completely different and it has a totally different feel and a philosophy. And so kind of to what we were talking about before, like I feel like it built upon something that was
Mhm.
a little iffy and really took it to the next level and made it something great that then could be built off
How
of.
dare you?
I know.
How
You
dare
know, I
you?
know. I know that's a controversial statement, but
I do have to say, like, we were talking about earlier, I went back and like watched the first episode of all Star Treks, just to like, kind of get myself back into like, how did these all begin? And the so the OG Star Trek had two pilots.
mhm.
One with Captain Pike, who's like never seen again in the OG Star Trek, and then like the now official like first episode with Kirk. And there is a huge difference in in the unaired like Captain Pike pilot and the Captain Kirk pilot. Like like there is an amazing difference. It almost makes the Kirk pilot look quality when you like
How
jump from
the slander over the original
I know,
series,
I
I tell
know,
you.
I know, but I mean, there's something impossible to ignore about like the limitations of technology at that time.
Mhm.
I think there's a certain point where technology goes back where you can tell it looks dated, but you're still forgiving because it can do enough. And of course, like the original Star Trek just isn't at that point yet. But when you look at the difference between the two, wow, uh, the pilot looks pretty polished. It's quite the difference, I have to say.
They
See,
made a good decision with that then.
It really did. They really did. I mean, their leading man, Captain Pike, actually wasn't too bad himself, but the entire like surrounding world, it was pretty rough, pretty rough. So I don't know who else they may have potentially replaced or fired along with Captain Pike, but it was a good decision.
Well, I think they replaced the entire cast except for Leonard Nimoy.
They did, yeah. I just mean like
Yeah,
production wise
production-wise.
as well.
Yeah.
There's very clearly somebody else in charge.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But yes, yeah,
Yeah,
they did
it's
a whole different cast, which is great.
it's too bad you guys don't have the appreciation for the original series. Like that's my favorite thing that I mean, and maybe people don't agree with this, but I've definitely heard it before. So some
Mhm.
people do that. The rebooted movies are much more like Star Wars films, and
Yeah.
J.J. Abrams himself has said how he's was a Star Wars fan,
Mhm.
and so I mean, you can look at the first one, and it plays a lot like the first Star Wars film.
Mhm.
Um, leave young adolescent, wanting to leave home, whatever kind of thing, and it has this sort of um I don't know, it becomes more of an action oriented, fast paced type of
Mhm.
thing. um and I argue, and I think lots of other people do, that it loses a lot of what makes Star Trek make and what makes Star Trek unique. So
Mhm.
I love those films, particularly the first one and the third one.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, do you guys feel that they're not particularly Star Trek in your mind? Do you still see them that way? Is it part of the whole universe to you? Do you care? Does like Star Trek, it can be so many different things to different people that it's all okay and I accept it all that way? Or is it like, this really doesn't fit like
Sure.
other elements?
Yeah, I mean, speaking for myself, like I think the JJ Abrams movies are the culmination of a trend in Star Trek that where it starts out more cerebral and it starts out more like we're going to explore and we're meeting and making contact and our mission isn't really to engage. um and it's a little bit more about learning and exploring, and that's really like the core of it. And then you can kind of see as more spin-offs like from Next Gen happen, the pilots start in the middle of battle, in the middle of action, like right, you're thrown in the thick of it, and it's a little bit less about like, here we're being introduced to the crew who's on a mission to go make contact with X. It's literally like, oh my God, we're in the middle of battle. And everything is chaos and everything is action and go, go, go. And we have to solve like an immediate threat or an immediate conflict. And then I think like the Star Trek movies that J.J. Abrams made were the culmination of that, like moving more towards action. And I certainly see how that happened and why, and especially that J.J. Abrams was such a Star Wars fan, which are more action oriented. But I don't particularly feel like they sit well with me in the Star Trek universe. You know what I mean? Like they are part of it out of, the sheer fact that like that's what they're labeled as. These are the characters, like they obviously have to be included in there. But it doesn't for me have the true feeling of Star Trek. They're almost like a weird hybrid.
I guess I've always felt like there was a big difference between the feel of the movies and the feel of the TV show, even going back to, I mean, I will say that, like, so the original Star Trek movies are pretty slow, I would say, and like maybe a little, but there's still like Klingon battle scenes and ships are exploding, and there's a lot more action in all of the movies than I feel like would be classically in the episodes, with the exception of maybe a few special ones.
Sure.
But I do think like the movies in general are, they just feel, they've always felt different to me than the show. And so the newer movies didn't bother me in that they were fast paced and explosions and fight scenes, because that's kind of what I was expecting from the last 15 20 years of the Star Trek movies.
Okay. Nice. So there was one other thing I was going to make a point of with that, but it slipped my mind at the moment.
Sure.
Did I properly address? I don't think I properly addressed your kind of dismissal of the original Star Trek. Um, So again, saying it didn't grab me as a kid. Later watching it, I appreciate it a lot more. Firstly, Spock is a real badass. Like you wouldn't mess with Spock. He's pretty cool, and I appreciate the classic characters and names that a lot of people would still be familiar with from this. I think that you could get more people, if you ask, 1,000 people between, Kirk and Picard, and you say this Data or Spock, these the original series is definitely more familiar to more people. They're more like, I mean, they're more pop culture icons than Next Gen. I feel like every other part of Star Trek has never managed to capture that sort of gravitas or like lasting impression on society like the original series. And as much as like fans may have loved a lot of the other shows, they've never made the lasting impression. I mean, maybe Picard is like the one thing, that enough people know Sir Patrick Stewart.
Yeah, I was gonna say I agree and I disagree. Because I feel like more people could name characters from the original Star Trek. I completely agree with like you've got Kirk, Spock, Nimoy, Uhura. Like I get that, people would be like, right, I recognize that name even if I have no idea quite what it's attached to other than just like that's from Star Trek. But I feel like just because like people wouldn't necessarily name, like Dr. Beverly Crusher or Worf or Data or Lore, you know, like just because they couldn't name supporting characters, they could only name Picard doesn't mean like the show itself didn't leave as much of a lasting impression,
Mhm.
because I feel like it did in that it like again spun off so many like different universes. I just think it maybe got a little muddied in people's minds over like which Star Trek am I watching because there were so many. And they did for a time look a great deal like each other.
Mhm. And they overlapped.
And they overlapped, yeah.
Mhm.
Hmm,
I think
okay.
that the original series is iconic in lots of ways in retrospect. Like even though it
Mhm.
wasn't hugely popular in the 60s and really only became popular later after it was
Right.
syndicated. But then looking back at that and seeing the influence of then this like syndicated show that had this racially diverse cast, that
Mhm.
had I keep reading that this is maybe not actually true, that it was the first interracial kiss on television
It
between. So
I
I thought that
believe that
that
it
was
was.
true, and then I read a story
People
once
always
that said it
say,
wasn't actually true, but I think it is maybe even if it isn't like truly the first on television, it's the one that people
Highly
think of
well,
being
visible.
the first one
Yeah.
and really visible in a very popular, family program.
yep.
So I think it's important for what it did for the time and this universe that it set up that
Mhm.
could be a better version of who we are as human beings.
Mhm.
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 Yeah, so I can kind of use that to bring it to like what keeps what makes Star Trek special from other science fiction content, other television shows or whatever. Um what makes it different, what makes it great in your mind, why it's still a big thing. They're still trying to make shows and video games and stuff off of it. Like what is it about Star Trek?
Yeah, I'm gonna like let Emily take over on that one, but just because I think you said it so well in the show notes about the hopeful tone that it sets.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like there's a real like not like happy go lucky optimism like everything is swell and dandy because, now we're out here in space, but
Mhm.
there's a real like this is futuristic technology that we're doing things with. We're
Mhm.
excited, we're exploring, we're not out here to just like go fight some space battles, or we're not, out here like Blade Runner is very like this is the future, but it's very, very dark and dreary. And, there's like this hugely pessimistic
Everyone's in like
angle.
trash planets
Yeah,
and yeah.
right. Like which is its own like beautiful aesthetic and
Mhm.
wonderful way to explore very interesting philosophical issues. But I
Mhm.
just think that Star Trek is different in this way in that it's like exciting. You're out there on the edge of space exploring, and this is great.
Mhm. Yeah, I would agree. It's the science of it, it's the exploration part of it, and it's also the way they show how people have become better versions of ourselves and we can collaborate and we have gotten over through struggles throughout hundreds of years to a place now where people are better and take care of each other better and can truly explore the universe with like without a colonial approach to
Mhm.
stripping the universe of its resources or trying to conquer. Like it puts it into just this, we want to learn, we want to
Mhm.
explore, we want to just experience the universe. And so I think it's unique from other sci-fi in that tone that it sets.
Mhm.
Yeah, and that's why I always think like that's what I hear, like common sentiment around it is like that hopeful thing, and I think that really does stand out. People will say that for a reason. That makes a lot of sense, because especially not too far after when I suppose Star Trek started, we got into this phase in the 70s of like very dour and
Mhm.
dark and pessimistic kind of things. We begin to explore more cyberpunk genre things, even stuff like when we eventually get to Alien and everything, this not only is it horror, but you just like the tone visually of everything.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's always about destruction and stuff. And
Mhm.
sometimes that's a thing that I feel is kind of lazy and plays off people's fears and stuff because when we look at the world, when we look at just how things have gone, like consistently fewer and fewer people in poverty, people living longer, it's like we've seen improvements. If you look at the dawn of man to now, things are better. So like, why
Hmm.
can't we have a hopeful view of the future and that things
Mhm.
will continue to improve? It makes a lot of sense. And it's fun to see. I think it's fun too that they did place it so far in the future. A
Mhm.
Hmm.
lot of other things kind of make the mistake of, you know, in the not too distant future kind of thing. And this is like, no, I don't know what it is. It's like 500 years in the future or something,
Yeah,
right?
24th century, I think, is when
Yep.
it's set.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Depending on the
Yeah,
show.
depending on the show. Mhm.
Um. Yeah. Yeah. It's weird because yeah, like there's something about setting something too near in the future.
Hmm.
But it's also like, doesn't this seem possible because like when we look at like the technology development over the last like you know 100 years to 50 years to 10 to 20 to 10 years, it's like there are these like crazy rapid things, but then when that year hits and we haven't developed like hoverboards or whatever, and and you just look at it and you're like, oh, somehow like this just like takes you right out of it.
Mhm.
So yeah, Star Trek does do a really great job of being like, let's just set it so far in the future that like people who are watching this can never get to that point, so we'll never know if we can or can't do these things.
I think it's also interesting how much real science has come from
Mm,
the Star Trek world
yeah.
and these, ideas in the 60s of these computers that you would talk to and these devices
Mhm.
that you would carry around with you that would transmit over long distances. And then, you get to holodecks, which is essentially like 3D
Yeah.
printers and VR, right? Um, and so I think that it's inspired also people in real science fields then for to give a
Mhm.
vision to the things that they're working on.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mhm.
I always love that. I mean, I love hearing those stories too about kids that grew up watching Star Trek or Wars, and one of them they wanted to be a pilot, or they end up being
Mhm.
an astronaut, or
Mhm.
yeah, or they end up working on something, and I'm sure there's people that were like working on the
Right.
Apple Watch, and I'm like, that's that were
Right.
inspired by the things that they could do and
Oh, yeah.
the
Yeah.
sci-fi things that they, you know.
I
I'm sure
read
there's
about
people
that one
working
of
in
the
medical field with it. Oh,
yeah,
good.
there's tricorders, right, that are being
Mhm.
developed that are supposed to like and they're like that's what people are calling them is the tricorders so that you can scan people with them. So I think they're absolutely and I think the idea back in the 60s again of the medical bed that could just scan your body and tell you what was
Mhm.
going on. Well, now we have MRIs and CT scans and
Right.
Mhm.
ultrasounds, like these things kind of then came into fruition. And I don't know if that's because somebody, in the 60s was watching Star Trek and went, "Oh, that'd be a really good idea." But
I think it's more influential sometimes than people think.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Where the people that are it seeps into your mind, pop culture things, and especially something like Star Trek that gives you things to strive for. I think totally that's a possibility. And it would be interesting to see a world where, you know, if you didn't have any of that stuff, what technology comes anyways, but I think that some of it would look different, you know, for sure. And then you
Mhm.
instead you have some like fanciful like writer somewhere coming up with some cockamamie idea, and then the scientist or engineer later like has something to base it on,
Mhm.
person's creativity. Otherwise, it becomes a completely different thing that they have to come up with themselves, and you know,
Mhm.
sometimes they're not the creative ones. So you need that
Mhm.
creative, you know, visionary.
I
Mhm.
feel like this is such a like a cool and funny argument for why the arts are important. You know, when people
Yeah.
ask that about like, you
Yeah.
know, to not drag it too into the real world of like when people say we should cut the arts in schools and you know, why should we fund that kind of thing? And it's like, but isn't this like a really great example right here of like somebody dreaming up technology in an art form that
Mhm.
now scientists are making real or have already or are currently making real. And like,
Yep.
isn't this such like a wonderful beneficial thing that like maybe wouldn't have happened,
Mhm.
you know, if it weren't for something like Star Trek, you know? I don't know. It kind
Mhm.
of
Yeah.
is a funny thing.
I think it's similar, just like seeing technology that you like would allow you to envision it becoming real. I think also Star Trek in its casting choices and the character
Mhm.
choices also allowed people to see
Right.
possibilities for their life.
Yep.
Um, One of my favorite things from Star Trek is actually Uhura, who Nichelle Nichols. Um, she ended up after, you know, in the 70s working with NASA and was
Mhm.
like a passionate advocate for getting Black women into space.
Yep.
And who would have listened to her, or why would she have had any influence on anything if she hadn't been Uhura from Star Trek? And she
Mhm.
did actually get Black women into space, and she's credited with being a big reason that Mae Jemison like got to be the first Black woman in space. And so I
Mhm.
think like just seeing those people and having this like vision of like, oh, like I actually could, as a like a little girl in the 70s, have seen a woman in these positions of power and thought, I can do
Right.
that. Like, yeah.
Right.
Pop culture is influential. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Mhm.
100%. Um, so favorite Star Trek memories,
Mhm.
things about Star Trek, moments or whatever that you just that stand out to you.
Ooh.
I'll say one.
Okay.
I went to they had the Star Trek experience in the Mall of America.
Mhm.
And yeah, I mean, I don't know, it was an event and me not being a really big Star Trek person, but I went and that was a lot of fun.
Mhm.
They tried to break down some of the science of it. They're like, okay, how about teleportation? Beam me up. What is that? Is that possible? And it'd break them down by if it's seem feasible or not. The quick answer is no, on that one. But just
For
based on
now.
the sheer like amount of energy required
Mhm.
uh alone, like in order to do that. But it was fun. They went through all kinds of different, like as we're talking, technologies, and then they had movie props and all that kind of thing. So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Mhm.
Gosh, I'm trying to think of like a moment.
Moment. Yeah, I guess I've never been to, you know, any of the conventions or any of the
Mm-mm.
bigger Star Trek things. I used to, my parents would go to a lot of antique stores and garage sales and stuff like
Mhm.
that when I was a kid. And it was right in the middle of my hardcore Star Trek days. And so I
Mhm.
would collect the fan fiction books and comic books and any little like
Mhm.
Star Trek memorabilia stuff. So
Sure.
that was always really fun, and I got to read a lot of some okay and some great fan fiction.
Nice. I didn't know it got like published. Like they
Oh, yeah.
published fan fiction. Oh,
Well, so I don't know, it's all, you know, written. I don't know if, like, if it became canon, like, it got the, you know, Star Trek label on it,
Right.
but it was written
right.
by multiple different people, and, um,
Hmm.
yeah. I don't know if it was really fan fiction or if it where it originated from, but
Yep.
there
Mhm.
are, you know, thousands of books out there and blogs and short stories and whatnots.
Right.
Yep.
Mhm.
I always love those things, and that to me is like a hallmark of something that is really better than its the sum of its parts. That it can inspire the creativity. You want to live in that world or
Right.
something. You want to invent something off of it. Like D&D is that thing for me. Star Wars used to be that thing for me. There's the things that you just like. Yeah, it makes you want to write and tell more stories in that world, and
Mhm.
yeah, that's pretty cool.
Mhm.
I have a piece of show and tell.
Ooh, what
Um,
have you got?
so I'm like an old, stereotypical old lady or something, I guess. And I have I do collect some stamps. So I
Nice.
have Star Trek stamps.
That's
Yeah.
cool.
So,
Great. The Final Frontier. Oh, I
yeah, um, they're pretty awesome. I go through them slowly. I basically stagger my stamps so I don't use them all up too much. So like I'll have one sheet of these, but then my next sheet will be Harry Potter ones. And then,
nice.
so it goes, so I'm not just like flying through all the Star Trek ones. I want to make sure they last. Um, but yeah, it's pretty cool. And there's a whole big thing on the back kind of talking about the history of Star Trek a little bit and stuff. So
Where did you get
Nice.
those?
the post office where you get
Oh, okay.
stamps.
Well, sometimes you have to like send away for like, different like TV shows or collector edition or, whatever kinds
Oh,
of stamps. You know what I
okay.
mean? They don't have like Star Trek at every post office. So,
Are you well, see, I mean, they have their run,
yeah.
and so I
Mhm.
miss a lot. I should go in once in a while a little more, I guess, or check their website or something. It's usually me showing up with something and, oh, what do you have for stamps now? And like I have some dinosaur ones that are really cool right now or whatever. And
Hologram ones.
yeah. Yep.
Nice.
Yeah, those are cool. Mhm.
hmm So, yep, me and my stamp collecting.
Mhm.
Um, what do you guys think of this state of Star Trek now? Like, is there any upcoming projects or currently running things or whatever that you're looking forward to or into right now? Or is what's our state of the union? Is it is it healthy or
So
generally? Or
I'm
what?
sorry, I'm gonna like interject just in the like watching the live stream that's happening on Paramount
Mm.
Plus. They did just like officially announce two upcoming projects, Star Trek Prodigy and Star Trek Strange New Worlds.
Mhm.
And they like didn't really give a whole bunch. They did a trailer for Prodigy. They didn't for Strange New Worlds, just showed us images of the cast, and who is all officially going to be included. So those are officially coming as like the newest additions um, to Star Trek, along with Discovery and I think Lower Decks are the only other
Mhm.
projects that are out right now.
I think so.
Okay.
I don't think they were planning to do more Picard. That seemed like a
Yeah,
one-off,
yeah,
which is
they've
probably
they've
okay.
been like, yeah, they've been really cagey about like if that's ever gonna like be a thing. So it makes me think no.
Yeah. I feel like they would have really hyped it up had it been the plan.
I agree.
Yeah.
So it's like healthy in the way of like there's a lot out there right now.
Mhm.
Um, I think it's hard to tell obviously for Prodigy and Strange New Worlds if they're going to be good. Can always
Yep.
hope, but yeah, it's healthy in terms of like the number of things that are happening.
Mhm. I at least appreciated in Picard and Discovery, I felt like
Yeah.
things have been visually beautiful and the
Yeah.
acting has been fantastic. Like I feel like they're not pulling their punches on production value for anything.
Okay.
Mhm.
The money's there.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
what of those new things have you all seen? Like you've seen basically all of it or pieces or
I have
Uh
not seen Below Decks at all, so that's
yeah.
yeah, I don't know anything about it, and I think it's a cartoon.
It is a cartoon and
yes.
it's like a parody kind of,
Yeah.
little satire of
Mhm.
not in the way that I think like Orville can be a little satire-y.
Mhm.
Um but yeah, it's like a true like let's make fun of Star Trek a little bit.
Mhm.
Okay.
I haven't really seen a whole bunch of it other than trailers.
I have seen Discovery up through the I
Mhm.
haven't seen the 3rd season yet, so I need to do that because they're gonna launch the 4th season in, like, 2 months, so I
Oh,
gotta catch up.
that's going
Okay.
fast.
Mhm.
So I mean, if there's some Star Trek content, I wanna jump in. Should I be jumping in to Discovery? Is that what I should be doing if I wanna get involved or when these new shows look promising or
You might I was
technical director Alan just says
mm,
TNG, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like TNG is like it's the show, but I also feel like maybe it would be better to watch Discovery without knowing the rest of the universe. I don't know.
Yeah. That's so tough.
Mhm.
Because Discovery takes place much earlier, right?
And
Oh yeah,
later.
yeah. So that-
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm,
Mhm.
okay.
There's some timey-wimey things.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And because of that, I feel like it's a little bit of a bubble. Like they're trying to do with it what they did with the reboot, which is to kind of create a show that can exist in canon but not be strictly tied to the historical precedent, right? Of the rest of the series. And so they
Mm-hmm.
purposely pulled Discovery kind of away from the normal timeline to be able to do other things with
Mm-hmm.
it.
So they sort of Abrams it
Yeah,
themselves.
they kind of did, which I think
Okay.
means that you don't necessarily have to have seen the rest of the Star Trek
Right. There's less pressure.
shows. Yeah,
Are
you could
you
probably
both
watch it.
comfortable with the way that they're doing that? So both Abrams and then Discovery, like, sort of, it's kind of reminds me of Marvel taking the multiverse approach, where it could be done well and to make it fun, or
Mm-hmm.
it could get messy and used to, like, do random things or to retcon things, or
Yeah.
so is it kind of lazy, like, well, we don't really want to have to play by the rules of pre-established, so let's do this and now we can do what we want.
That's actually my concern for Strange New Worlds. Because it's now going back again. And I believe it's gonna be set in like the Captain Pike years,
Mm.
which like even though that pilot was like never aired for Star Trek, it was like an established like Pike was the commander on the Enterprise before Kirk, and like that's accepted, like that's a thing. And so now Strange New Worlds is going back, and it's like, can we stop, can we stop going back and like somebody choose to go forward? You know what I mean? Like there's
Hmm.
only so much that like you feel like can be set before without, having consequences for things like next gen.
Mhm. Yeah, I would like to see them do more after, I guess, the most after Voyager and after Discovery, because Voyager and Deep Space Nine, because I think those are the most forward in the timeline.
Mhm.
And so it would be nice to see more of that. Like
Yep.
you're right, everything since then has gone back.
And to me, that again calls to the, like, fear that, the cultural touchstones are all these classic things that have been done before, so namely OG Star Trek and Picard. And
Mhm.
then
Mhm.
like, nothing since has really, like, captured everyone. So what do? Well, we're gonna keep milking those other things,
Right.
as opposed to,
Mhm.
like, someone having to really write the next thing. I mean, we ran into this with Star Wars too. Like,
Mhm.
instead of, like, taking the opportunity to leave the Skywalkers behind or something, we had to use them again. We had to,
Right.
like, go there, and it was, half-assed or whatever, but like, it's move on,
Mhm.
Mhm.
if you're telling compelling, amazing stories with great characters, done well and um written deftly, then
Mhm.
people will be excited.
Right. And I don't want to gloss over Prodigy because I don't know where that is set, and that may be in the future. And maybe somebody's taking a risk there, but it almost feels like they feel safer to take a risk because the show is animated. Um, so maybe they're not
Oh,
feeling like it.
Prodigy's animated?
Prodigy is animated, yes.
Mhm.
Okay.
So I don't know if there's some sort of like freeing element there if it is set in the future. I saw the
Right.
trailer, but I had the sound muted, so I didn't know like where it kind of falls in the.
There's one fan
verse.
site that says it takes place basically the same time period as Voyager,
Oh,
right
okay.
after the end of Voyager.
Interesting. Okay. So that's moving
I have
something
to
forward a little bit.
I have to say that I don't know what to think of the concept art. It definitely
Oh,
looks
Friday.
a
Yeah.
little kind of unique, you
Yeah.
know? It looks different.
It's not animated
Not
in the way
sure.
that like Lower Decks is animated.
Mhm.
Right. Yeah, definitely different styles. I was just looking
Hmm.
at the picture here and I don't know. Okay. Well, that's something.
Yeah.
But yeah, lots of irons and lots of fires. So
Mhm.
there's lots of choices out there. Just got to see what's
Yeah,
going to be what's the next big hit.
I feel like Paramount Plus has a lot of eggs in this basket, in the Star Trek basket right now. And I
Mhm.
think they're really trying to find ways to make Star Trek work. Um, I mean,
I'm really
obviously,
bothered that Paramount is making us pay for everything.
yes, I agree. I agree.
But
I think that's their like draw of like come pay for our subscription service, and they're putting,
yeah.
like I said, putting a lot of eggs in that basket to draw
Mhm.
people for that.
Well,
Mhm.
I mean, I always argue that like network television is like a dying thing. You know, do you agree with that, Emily, or you think like there's a lot of life left in that? Is it a viable way to consume stuff going forward?
I don't think so. I don't like and maybe I'm old enough that I don't know, but I don't know anybody who watches network television. Like I stream everything, and I feel like that's the way it's going.
Yep.
Mhm.
You know, and I don't like that there is a million services, you know, and everybody's trying to make their own thing.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah,
Mhm.
Paramount Plus, they've got to do something to get people. Like they've got to have something compelling. And if they see Disney over there, they have Star Wars and Marvel. Oh my God, you know, what can we do over here?
Right.
Paramount, they had you know, what Star Trek and reruns of The Office. Is it The Office they have?
No, Peacock has The Office.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I forgot about
Yeah.
Peacock.
Right? There's so many services you forgot about them.
I mean, it seems
Yeah,
essentially like the services are becoming the network TV, except for rather
Right.
than the ads, we're just paying for each
yeah.
station.
Right.
And that's kind of the fear
And
is
we're
we're gonna
paying
end up
for
paying
ads.
$10 a
We're paying
month
for the
for
ads.
all these channels, and by the time you get them all, it's like, I mean, you could have just had cable for like 300 channels for less or whatever,
Mhm.
and you have to deal with ads. But I pay like $78 a month for Hulu, and I still have ads.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep, you do.
So,
Yeah,
oh
somehow
man.
someway we got Jedi mind tricked into basically paying for network television with ads.
Mhm.
Mhm. Yep. Fun times. Fun times. It's
Yeah.
the bright future that Star Trek promised.
It's okay, they don't really watch much TV in Star Trek.
Yeah. All right, we're running out of time. What
Mhm.
is there anything else, a stone that's not been turned over here that you must get in on the 55th anniversary of Star Trek?
Mm.
What do you think?
I don't know. I do feel a little bad that we didn't just love the original, but I feel like
Yeah.
that
I
being
mean, that's
honest.
me. From what I've seen, I like the original a lot.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying I dislike the original. It's just not like, to me, like ultimate Star Trek is next gen.
Yeah.
That's just
Um,
like the epitome. It's like where, like the Star Trek heartbeat is next
Mhm.
gen. I think that Star Trek, like OG Star Trek, was instrumental in like obviously making that happen. And it's like, kind of revived success, paved the way for next gen to happen. And I think it was something that was really ahead of its time
Mhm.
in terms of like not only diverse casting, different storylines, like, what do we imagine the future to be like technology wise? But I think it was a risk to even put a show about space travel on television at that time. Like it is a very like what we think of as like nerdy now. I don't know if they had, like that descriptor at the time, but it was definitely not like your normal network television show, and I appreciate the risk that people took in putting it on and making it as iconic as it's now become today. It's just not like, to me, like the beating heart of Star Trek, like I said.
Mhm.
The beating heart of Star Trek is the Orville,
Yeah.
as Emily had mentioned earlier. I think that's one of the most true Star Trek things there is, and it's
It
not.
is. Yeah.
It's obviously not official, but it's too bad because it clearly comes from the mind of a
It-
person that loves the original show, but that they'd never give the job to do
yeah.
it, you
Mhm.
know. And it's handled with such a brilliant balance of comedy and seriousness. Like they tackle real like Twilight Zone sort of fundamental questions at the same, and like the flipping the story, rolls on their head or whatever, like putting you in different people's shoes and stuff like that.
Mm,
But at the same time, being silly, which kind of works because if you go back and watch the original Star Trek today, a lot of it is silly
mhm,
because of the technology and whatever. So it's sort of really, really feels like that. And I think that it's underappreciated. And it's too bad that they didn't just bring in
mhm.
um uh McFarlane
Seth
Seth
MacFarlane, yeah.
No problem.
to just do a show.
I
Mhm,
But
would just love to see more Orville. Like I've
mhm.
been sad that there have been more seasons of it. So I
mhm.
hope there will be. But
Yep.
mhm.